I'm going to. Eduardo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and actually I'm welcoming everyone to the webinar. I think well, more than 60 people have joined, and some more will join afterwards. My name is Eduardo Suarez. As some of you know, I am the head of communications here at the Reuters Institute, and I will be the chair of the event. We are very fortunate today that our speaker is Meera Selva. She's the director of our journalist fellowship program, as you know. And she's also the author of a recent piece that we published on the threats to press freedom during the pandemic. Also the author of a report on press freedom in Eastern, Central and Eastern Europe. So there's a lot you know, to talk today. Here the rules of the webinar first, some of you know, but for the ones that are joining today for the first time, you know, Meera will share a presentation first. There will be today some contributions by some of our journalist fellows from countries like Brazil, like Germany, like Norway, like other countries. And then after that, there will be questions. So I really encourage you to leave your questions using the chat function that you can see on your screen, at the bottom of your screen. And I will, you know, raise the questions with Meera, with some of the fellows after the presentation. There's going to be like an hour or so. That's what we are aiming for. So there's plenty of time to talk about this really pressing topic. And without further ado, you know, I leave the floor to Meera. Thank you, Meera.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for dialing in today. And thanks especially for everyone who's dialed in from all over the world. You know, it's a really, really difficult time and really appreciate you taking the time to talk. I wanted to have this session about press freedom because the Journalist Fellowship Program at the Reuters Institute covers many things. It covers business models, it covers misinformation, it covers technology and innovation, but crucially, more and more, it covers press freedom, issues of censorship. And what I've really noticed in the few years I've done the job is that it's something that affects journalists everywhere. It's not just something that affects journalists who are working under authoritarian governments, but it's affecting journalists in Western Europe, in North America, Australia. And every time we have one of these sessions, it always ends up being slightly like a therapy session where people also use the opportunity to share their stories, but also to kind of really realize you're not alone. So when you're in your newsroom and you've got to make these incredibly difficult decisions over what to report and crucially what not to report because it's too dangerous or because you don't want the kind of online attacks that you know will be triggered, it's just important to know that there are journalists all around the world who are in the same position as well. So we're facing we're in an extraordinary moment in history with COVID-19, and there are new threats to press freedom. But I wanted to start with a situation with pointing out that these threats, most of them are not new. And to start with, I just want to talk about this report that I published in January, based on a survey of journalists in Central and East Europe, and we surveyed them in October 2019, so before this crazy time started. But what I wanted to find out then was what they were concerned about, what were the threats, what did they feel was affecting their ability to do their job. And I'm just going to go through some of the points very quickly, just because I want to see what was a threat to press freedom then, and then we can discuss whether the same things are valid and whether we're facing new threats now. So what we did at the time was we surveyed journalists across 16 different countries, and we fielded the questions in October to December, and we sent the survey via email to journalists. Most of the journalists who responded, you know, were English speaking and tended to work for the independent media, so that does skew the results a little bit. But nonetheless, what we found was that there were 6 key concerns that they all said. One was they were very concerned about the anti-journalist rhetoric, and this was often rhetoric that was coming from the top, was coming from their governments, from politicians, from businessmen, who were basically undermining public trust in the media, launching very personal attacks on journalists, which led to the second point, which was the kind of worry of online and offline attacks. They were often being attacked online via trolling, via vicious emails, via having pornographic videos with their head post, you know, especially for women journalists, having their heads posted on kind of pornographic videos and distributed over the internet, slurs on their sexuality, and also really, really tragically offline attacks, assaults, beatings, car accidents, and in some terrible cases, murder. The other concern that was kind of fairly common across the region was one of media capture, which was the idea that a lot of media houses were being sold off to proprietors who were close to the government and then used the media in order to promote kind of government messaging. And related to this was the weaponization of state advertising. And this is governments deliberately moving public sector advertising away from independent media outlets and using it to shore up propaganda outlets of propaganda. The other area of concern, which I'd like to come back to, is one of the concerns about protection of sources and concerns over their own privacy. Remember, this is Central and East Europe, which has a long history of kind of surveying journalists and private citizens. But nonetheless, pretty much all the journalists we surveyed said they had had direct experience of being tapped, of having their emails hacked, and of being followed. So this was something that they were very, very concerned about. And the final thing, which again I think is very, very pertinent for this time, is what they were really struck by was the lack of solidarity amongst other journalists. So when they came under attack, either from politicians or online, or their credibility was somehow undermined, journalists working at other newspapers didn't stand up for them, didn't show solidarity. And this is something that will really affect us all, I think. So now if we could turn down to today. And this is just kind of talking about the surveillance, which is the kind of things that they really saw that they'd had their phone calls tapped or recorded, been asked to identify sources, received death threats, had emails intercepted, and been doxxed. And if we turn now to today, and this is a chart from the International Press Institute, which has been tracking the number of media violations across COVID-19. I must point out several organizations, including Index on Censorship, Reporters Without Borders, the Committee to Protect Journalists, have also been doing excellent work in tracking media violations. This is just a very striking, simple infographic that shows that, firstly, that the attacks are happening everywhere, including America and Europe. And also it kind of shows you what the biggest attacks are, and these kind of verbal and physical attacks, excessive fake news regulation, censorship, restriction on access to information, arrest and charges. I did a report on this that we published at the Reuters Institute a few weeks ago. And again, in this report, I kind of divided the threats into 5 broad threats. And what I'll do now is go through them individually. And then what I'd like to do is kind of bring in some of the journalist fellows in particular who I've asked to kind of, who spoke to me on this report. And, I'd like to know their kind of thoughts on this. The first thing to talk about is the emergency. We're in a state of emergency in all countries. We're accepting unprecedented restrictions on our freedoms. Freedom to move, freedom to travel, freedom to report, and this is often backed by legislation. So several governments have declared a state of emergency over COVID-19, and they've suspended rights and norms that have been used to protect free speech and media. And most strikingly, Hungary has passed an indefinite emergency decree that effectively suspends parliamentary democracy and puts up a prison sentence of up to 5 years for spreading false information, adding what many journalists feel would be another weapon in a kind of general attack against independent journalism. And you see the same thing in Jordan as well, where the government has legislation that was really designed for war or disaster, that gives the Prime Minister control of messages, newspapers, publications, drawings, and all means of expression. It's kind of an extraordinary case. It gives the authorities the power to seize, confiscate, disable news operations, close places where they're prepared, so shut down newsrooms even before anything has been published. The next area we talk about is kind of unpatriotic reporting, and this is something we've seen everywhere because COVID-19 has been framed very much in national terms. It's been a crisis that each national government has had to deal with by itself. There's been remarkably little solidarity, especially the early stages, and cooperation between governments. We saw this in the European Union when Italy was one of the first countries to come under, to have been hit very hard, and the Italian government felt very strongly that they hadn't been given the support they would have expected from the rest of the EU. And crucially, it's a story that invites comparisons. Which country has the highest death rate? Which country is doing better? Which country is coming out of lockdown earlier? This is all to do with international comparisons. And the flip side of that is that there's kind of great push to be patriotic. And in some countries, it's been explicit. In India, hours before the lockdown was announced, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi asked 20 key media owners and editors to take a positive tone in their coverage. And crucially, most of them did. And this area of kind of being unwilling to hear criticism has spilled over into other areas as well. The third area is a kind of very, very practical one. There are travel and permit restrictions on everybody and on journalists as well. In several countries, journalists have been given certain exceptions. They've been classified as key workers, and so they are technically allowed to go. But it is a barrier to free reporting, partly because not all journalists have this exception, and even when they do, they often require permits, and those permits are handed out by authorities, kind of comms office of the president's office. So it's another level of gatekeeping of someone deciding who can report. And the other issue has also been kind of access for photographers who found it very hard to go into hospitals and report on what is essentially the front line of our war right now. And that's the fact that this front line is happening in medical wards makes it very hard to visualize and to describe, because not only do you have issues of patient confidentiality, but again, it's very easy to close the doors and not let journalists through. The next one, which is something that we have always seen, is the misuse of misinformation laws. And the laws against spreading misinformation are, as always, being used to attack journalists who stray from the official line. We'll have examples, I think, from some of our journalist fellows in future, but this is just something that's we've always spoken about, the weaponization of fake news laws. And in this period, when misinformation is spreading on several different levels, the tools to attack misinformation are also being used to attack the free press. And the final point, which I'd really like to kind of draw out, is the issue of source protection and undermining whistleblowers. This is two things we've certainly seen even in the UK. Doctors, yesterday a kind of a member of parliament being fired from a job for speaking out against the shortages of protective equipment for health workers, for speaking out against the lack of coherent testing. And we're also seeing very personalized attacks on scientists who are giving, whose job it really should be just to interpret the data. They shouldn't be put into the kind of political battlefield. And another thing, which I think is something we really need to be aware of journalists, is the danger that this whole scenario presents to us, to journalists' ability to protect sources. We now are in a situation where the contact, test and trace policy, which involves tracking populations, involves most people downloading apps onto their phone that can then be used by authorities to track movement. It's very important to note that a lot of this technology is being introduced without proper oversight from Parliament, without proper oversight from civil society. There's a real risk that this can be used to basically make journalists hand over their source data, to hand over documents, confidential documents to authorities, either kind of knowingly that authorities say we now have the right to gather this, or unknowingly that journalists just suddenly realize that the security of their equipment is compromised through this. And this is something that we really do need to look at. I'm going to go open it out soon, but what I do want to say is there have been some extraordinary examples of good journalism at this time. So while I talked about the desire for unpatriotic reporting, Brazil, and I'm very glad we've got two of our Brazilian fellows here. Brazilian journalists have been raising the roof over the president's response to COVID-19. This is one of the most striking covers I've ever seen. It's from Piauí, the Brazilian version of the New Yorker magazine, an incredibly well-respected print publication. And it's an incredibly brave cover. And it's forceful, it's memorable. And again, I'd really be interested to hear about what impact, what's the thinking behind saying something so explicitly? Is it a sense of frustration that nothing else is being done, or is there something else? And even in India, while many countries did kind of submit to Narendra Modi's request, request to not be critical of the government. There are plenty of sites that have done some incredibly independent reporting. This is today's front page from Scroll, which goes immediately with the question I've always been wondering about the data. Who's registering the deaths? How do we trust the numbers? There's stories about prisons. There are stories about the Navy. There are stories about migrant workers. It's good reporting on the ground about the people who are really being affected by this. And Indian journalists, again, have come under tremendous attack. And I think it's very important to recognize also what incredible work many of them are doing in very, very difficult circumstances. And the final kind of country that gives me a massive amount of hope is the one I used to work in, actually, which is Singapore, which is a country that has, was one of the most eager to introduce fake news laws. It's a country where there's very little independent journalism. Much of the main newspapers and broadcasters are essentially controlled by the government, and a country that's used to living under a huge amount of surveillance, CCTV everywhere. And nonetheless, when the government there tried to introduce the kind of contact app, the app that's meant to track all your movements, only 20% of the population downloaded it, because there was genuine concern about privacy and and data rights, and what are these people going to do with it. So even in a country that's lived within this bubble with very little free speech and very little freedom of information, and a society that's been willing to accept huge restrictions on their personal freedoms for what the government would call the greater good, there's still, as on an individual level, people are still saying, we don't fully accept this, we want more answers, we want more information. And this just made me smile. It's very hard in Singapore because of all the legislation to be truly critical. So what people have started to do is use Lord of the Rings for dissent. So they've started using memes from Lord of the Rings to express their dissatisfaction with the government at the moment. So here you've got, once you've downloaded the Trace Together app, you'll realize, but they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made. And there are all sorts of memes. And this is, again, it's satire, it's independent thought. It's not people saying they don't want to cooperate with the government, because there is a sense, there is an appreciation that Singapore has handled the COVID-19 pandemic relatively well, but there is a demand for more data, for better journalism, for more dialogue. And that's the space where journalists worldwide need to kind of jump in and say, this is what the public really do want, and this is what we should do. Thank you. And what I'd like to do now, if that's okay, Eduardo, I'll stop sharing, is, if it's okay, I'll go to Daniela and Consuelo first to just ask you a little bit about Brazil.
Right.
Hi.
You want to ask something, or can I start talking?
Just start. I'll ask you, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Brazil is now the major global center of the pandemic, reporting nearly 8,000 deaths. And Bolsonaro is the leader of coronavirus denial movement. And I think he does that because he needs to keep talking to the 30% of Brazilians that still support him. And he behaves like a tribal chief, not a president. But different from Turkey and Egypt and the other countries you've mentioned. And you can see by the Piauí's cover, Brazil is still a very democratic country. So we can't say that we are under threat in a way, like journalists have been sent to jail. And for me, it's more like my main concern, and I've been saying this for a while, it's self-censorship, because it's the invisible threat for the future of journalists. But I think in Brazil, this strategy is making a terrible environment for us doing our work. And for example, on Sunday, on the World Press Freedom Day, journalists were attacked, physically attacked, cursed, and expelled in Brazil during a pro-Bolsonaro demonstration in Brasilia. And Bolsonaro was alerted by an ad, and he reinforced the attitude of these people, saying that the media was there to create problems and to talk nonsense and blah, 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 blah. So they were attacked by Bolsonaro support. So I think it's a different thing. It's not something from the government by itself, which is kind of weird, and more, I think for me, it's more dangerous, because a president will never expose himself like punching someone in the face, but you need a single idiot like a Bolsonaro supporter to do so. So this week also, he told journalists to shut up when asked about COVID-19 death tolls. And I think this kind of, when the president, he produces and he, make this kind of no, it's not, it's a hidden threat somehow, but it's a very insecure environment for us to, speak out for, making questions. I think self-censorship, it's something that we should really, really get, aware about.
Yeah, I think self-censorship is a really important point, and if anyone on the call has any points, please do jump in on the chat on that, because what I did notice when I was doing the survey on press freedom in Central and East Europe, I asked about self-censorship, and that's the one thing that nobody admitted to. Nobody wants to admit that they are self-censoring themselves, and it's a very hard thing to admit, because you have to admit it to yourself before you admit it to anybody else. Thank you very much, Daniela. Consuelo, I just want to ask you, because you work for Piauí and you've just gone back to Brazil from the fellowship, what's been the reaction to the cover? You're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
In the meantime, Meera, I think there's a great comment by Martin on the chat on self-censorship. I don't know if you can read it and take a look at that.
Great, thank you. Yes, great, thanks, Martin. Martin kind of is saying that Daniela makes a good point about self-censorship, and in South Africa, your free-to-air news channel invited its anchors to do commentary at the start of each bulletin, and two of the most popular anchors made comments that week that were critical of the government, and they were forced to apologize and were later suspended. So in a way, self-censorship is a perfectly sensible thing to do in these conditions, because why would you expose yourself to it? Consuela, can you unmute yourself? No, still can't hear you. Well, Consuelo mutes herself. I'm going to go to Tejas. It's okay. Tejas, can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
As a host, you can do this.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tejas. I just wanted to ask you about India, and we talked about one thing Daniela mentioned, which is leaders also getting their supporters to attack journalists, and this is definitely something we saw in India. What's the mood at the moment since you've been back? I know you haven't been able to leave the flat much.
Yeah, so government is not interacting with media at all. So there has been no press conference by Prime Minister Narendra Modi at all. But even the Health Minister has not addressed the media, nor Home Minister. So all the media queries are handled by the Joint Secretary, a person who's like much lower in the rank. So the government is not talking to media at all. And even in the press conference, very few questions are taken by the media. So there is no like two-way communication. Prime Minister addresses the public once in a week or so. So that is so there is like, that hiding of information, or not communicating with the media, not taking any questions. So therefore, journalists do not know how much to rely on the official statistics, because there is no way to cross question the government about it. That is one thing. Another was in the initial phase, before the lockdown, there was one gathering by Muslims in the capital, and a lot of cases emerged after that gathering, and even the government highlighted that event a lot. And that event happened before the lockdown, when the measures were not in place. And after the lockdown, the UP Chief Minister, he attended a religious gathering, and one media publication covered that event. It was a public event, so there is no question about that event, having happened. But the UP government filed a case against the editor of that publication, even though it's on, on record. That event was on record. So you can see the difference, the way they, when they had a chance to, create Hindu-Muslim narrative about the pandemic, they went for it. The joint secretary in the press conferences, kept highlighting the cases that emerged from that Muslim religious gathering event. But the UP chief minister, who is ruling party chief minister, he filed a case against this publication's editor. So we see, this kind of thing happening, where they're trying to curtail the flow of information, but also going after the journalists who are covering the issue seriously. And you also mentioned the Prime Minister, having a closed door meeting with media editors.
Yeah.
And I have not followed the coverage minutely, but I am keeping track of few publications. So I see that they are covering the issue well. They are doing a lot of stories around pandemic, but the critical stories about the government are not hitting at anybody. The kind of stories that are critical that they're doing, you can't hold anybody accountable as such. It's
They're
like
not landing any
generally
blows.
critical of the government, but you can't point finger at any minister or prime minister. So there is no direct criticism of the government. So that's also something that I'm noticing.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Tejas. Thanks very much. We'll go back to Consuelo. Consuelo, hi.
Right.
Hi, we can hear you now. No, you're still muted.
I think he's.
Okay.
I think she's not muted now, actually.
Not muted, but I still can't hear her. I'm going to go. I just want to raise one point which Tejas highlighted quite correctly, which is one attack on press freedom is this kind of inability to speak directly to politicians. And this can either be because they won't hold press conferences and they won't meet with journalists, or in Britain where they will hold press conferences, but they're not, it's all being done virtually, which makes it very easy to basically, firstly control which journalist you give access to, and really to frame the question, and it takes away the dialogue. And we're in a very strange situation at the moment where everything is being done on Zoom and everything is being done digitally. And if journalism and political journalism is also being done like that, all the kind of the extra conversations that happen around the main government messaging don't get through. Saleh, hi, are you ready? I just wanted to ask you about Yemen in particular, because there's been some very striking attacks on press freedom in Yemen at the moment. I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about those.
Thank you. Yes, I think, actually, the last thing Yemen needs now is COVID-19, given all crises they're going through now. So, and just I also need to point out that we have 3 governments in Yemen, which is make it even harder to tackle the disease or the COVID-19. We have one. The internationally recognized government, which is in exile. We have the government, the rebels in the north, and they have their own government backed by Iran. And then we have the separatist government in the south, and backed by the UAE, Emirates. So, and then the COVID-19, and every party is trying to politicizing it in a way that they're trying to topple down or to overthrow or undermine the other party. So if you are not, they will they will use it. Hey, you're not doing well dealing with the crisis, so you don't deserve to be at the head of the government. Sorry?
No, carry on. Sorry.
Okay. And we have this narrative in the north, which is say, hey, the COVID-19 is American made, product. So they're trying to spread it. They're trying to spread it in Yemen with the help of Saudis. Be careful. This gives us the journalists a signal that you can't report it, which make everybody trying to practice the self-censoring. Like, hey, we can't report this. We're gonna be hit. We're gonna be punished if we're doing it. And actually, this would happen when they reported the first case in the north, and then he's an official who reported the case, and then he was suspended, and then that was another signal that there's no way you can report it, and they're asking everybody to listen to the government or what the government is saying. Many journalists are trying to report it, but nobody's taking them for granted. Like, hey, and then the government is trying to suppressing that. Like, it's and recently. In the north again, where the rebels are controlling, they reported that they actually revealed the nationality of the first death case in the north of COVID-19, which is really bad. Like they're giving the nationality of the guy, and they're saying he's Somali, and that's kind of this is how people in the country and in the region felt about it. This is kind of racism act, like you're revealing the nationality of the guy, and saying he's an Somali immigrant in Yemen, is having the disease. So everybody is now unfortunately looking badly at them, like, hey, stay away from us. You see this kind of thing. It's like what happened in somewhere in the world, like, hey, the Chinese. People look at how they looked at Chinese at the beginning. So it's the same thing now in Yemen. They're looking at Somalia as the carrier of the disease.
Thanks, Alex. I think what you're kind of saying is that what's really striking in Yemen is, like you said, it's the last thing it needs now. And this crisis is in every way highlighting every structural weakness in every single country. And when you've got a country that's as failed as Yemen is at the moment, it's kind of impossible to get a kind of accurate sense of information flowing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think, Miriam, if you're there, because when I mentioned the travel restrictions and permits, Miriam Grace GO, who works for Rappler in the Philippines, came up with very good examples there, very precisely, where journalists are permitted to travel to affected regions to report, but they need to get a permit, and that permit needs to be issued by the presidential office. So with the best will in the world, there's an extra level of bureaucracy. Miriam, if you're there, can you tell us if that permit system is working now?
Yeah, it's the limited passes for journalists are still in place. This as long as the Metro Manila and the surrounding provinces are on lockdown. So what I think happened is that in the emergency legislation that we passed, giving the president extra powers, there was really no intent to like limit the media's work. It was in the guidelines after the law that it was indicated media organizations could only like send out half of their workforces to the field. This is where the problem started, because as you see, if any of our reporters would be the government failed to imagine that we don't only deploy reporters and cameramen, of course. You would have a driver assisting them and all the other, you would have your social media producers having to travel to the office, but all this have been limited because of the quota that they assigned to every news organization. And then when any of our reporters get sick or will have to take some day off, we cannot replace them with some other reporters because the pass are named under them and it's non-transferable. So I think what happened is that the press has become a collateral damage in the government's peace and order approach in responding to the outbreak.
Right.
Yeah. So
Okay, and how much are you managing to get out personally? Are you still mainly based at home?
So everything is done virtually. We attend press conferences virtually, and as you pointed out earlier, it presents the difficulty of us not being able to ask the hard questions, because it's the government offices, the officials who have control of what questions would be entertained. The lockdown is also requires government offices to maintain only skeleton staff. So when there are data that you need to acquire and you want to go in depth in your report, it's also difficulty because they will just throw at you the excuse that they don't have enough personnel to attend to your requests.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it's really
what,
striking that everyone is using this as an excuse to do what they didn't want to do anyway.
But I think what's more worrisome in the Philippine experience is that in the emergency law, there's a provision that people caught propagating fake news could be charged criminally. And this has not been used against journalists so far, but it's targeting a lot of legitimate social media users raising legitimate questions. But the connection with journalists is that because journalists are limited in what we can do and where we can cover, we depend a lot on internet users, on our citizen journalists based in the provinces, for example, or even around the metropolis. They are the ones telling you what's really happening on the ground, how police are abusing their additional powers now, how the the aid is delayed in being distributed in the communities. But because the government is really actively going after people who post critical posts like that, it sends a chilling effect, and netizens would be afraid to post things like that, and so it again limits the journalists' idea of what's happening in the communities.
Thanks very much, Miriam. One last question, because Rappler has been so proactive and also tracking misinformation and trolling. Have you seen any evidence at all? You might not know whether the legislation that's been passed has been effective against doing what it's meant to be doing, which is combating misinformation on COVID-19.
Well, there's been an increase in the reports we've been getting about misleading, misinformation and disinformation. So it means that people who want to spread lies are more active now, precisely because they are not the ones being targeted by government when they make arrests or send subpoenas. The ones being subpoenas are legitimate, people, social media users. They are not bots, they are not trolls. But the trolls are not, being targeted by government, so they have more time, especially since they are all working from home. So they have more time producing this information, actually.
Thanks very much, Miriam. That's really, really fascinating. Consuela, can we hear you now?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Hi, welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Lovely to see you again. I just wanted to know what the reaction was to the POE cover amongst other journalists and the public.
Part support and part attacks us, and you can see this on Twitter. But and it's kind of part the support of the Bolsonaros against. But the problems here, I think, we don't feel that you're having problems. I'd like to talk about self-censorship, because we continue to do this, POE doing this kind of cover. And what I think is, on contrary, the Brazilian press remains very, very, very critical of Bolsonaro. And he, of course, is very, very angry about us. And even when I arrived in Oxford, and I told you that he attacked us every day in social media, my concern now is about what Daniela was telling. It's about physical violence, because we are not being arrested, we are not being censored, we don't have this kind of problem. But among the supporters of Bolsonaro, there is armed gangs, a kind of militias. And really now, I don't know if suddenly this kind of person decide to shut us. That's the problem. We don't know where's the danger is. Because Parliament defend us, the just defend the press, say Bolsonaro can't attack press the way that he's attacking. But when he goes to the social media and say, liar press, the press is trying to put me down of the government, because this, his supporter, goes to the street and try to attack us physically. This is, for me, is the biggest danger that we're suffering now. I'm really concerned about this. Not because the law is protecting us, not because of censorship, because the press is really brave now. We are attacking him, we are critical him, but I'm concerned about his supporters. I've never seen this in my life. I don't see any parallel in our history. I don't know, I think kind of Nazis. I think as the Nazis do with the people in the street, attack the people in the street, that is my real concern now. They do something, they shout at journalists, and Bolsonaro say it's not my fault. I didn't ask for nobody to do this. I think this is our biggest problem in Brazil now.
I think it's it's really extremely concerning to hear you say that. And I think this idea that journalists are beginning to feel very concerned for their personal safety. I mean, we saw this even in the UK, where the BBC political editor Laura Kunsberg had her own bodyguard when she went to a party conference. It's a concern everywhere, and you're absolutely right that politicians who kind of use anti-media rhetoric are then able to step back and say, "But I didn't do this. I didn't ask for this." But there has to be an awareness of what language is used. Thank you. I'm just going to go to comments, because some really interesting comments. Jacob Krupa, who is Polish journalist based in London. Hi, Jacob.
Hi.
And hi. And you had a very good point on self-censorship, which is, that's one of the reasons you think there's a lot of high-profile departures from state-controlled media, because people don't want to self-censor.
Yes, has the comment on this, or?
Which numbers are reliable and which ones aren't. So today I want to try to...
We can't quite hear you. If other people could mute themselves, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was something else. Do you want me to elaborate on that, or?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's the key thing. In Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, the countries they know best, I think there's been quite a lot of people leaving the jobs in the last years, saying, we are not willing to kind of follow the rules that the editors want them to follow. And I think there's a substantial thing that you could see people who've had like 15, 20 years of history in certain publications saying, we just are not willing to do this, and we're not going to do that. And quite a lot of them actually been making statements, public statements, saying we're not ready to do what you're asking us to do. And therefore, again, what you see is obviously, instead of having these respected journalists who've been working for years, you get new people coming in who kind of subscribe to that kind of way of doing journalism. And obviously then these outlets become more favorable towards the government. And as a natural thing, and I think I've seen someone asking that in the comments section, as a natural consequence of that, the more pro-government the public media become, the more pro-opposition the other media become. Therefore, it's being kind of slightly less balanced than they would be normally. And that kind of makes it even more difficult to have a normal debate and normal discussion. So one of the really fascinating things in the last few months I've seen in Poland, particularly, is that some of the journalists leaving the public media because of the bias, they would not join the private media, but they would start their own outlets, saying that's the easiest way to do it, because in the private media, we would be asked to do kind of the mirror version of what we were doing in the public media. So I think that's quite interesting that kind of clearly there's a growing number of different projects and happening outside the kind of usual public-private media division.
that's a really good point, the kind of tribalism, increasing tribalism in the media. And again, when I did the report on Central and East Europe, a lot of journalists of the independent media say they don't want to be political fighters. They don't want to have to take sides and be seen as constantly opposing government. What they want to be able to do is report, impartially, but that seems to be impossible in this kind of media environment. And that ultimately undermines everyone's credibility as well. And Monica had a really interesting point as well, which is that Monica Elena, on Daniela's point about that journalists are attacked by Bolsonaro supporters, and that's relevant beyond Brazil's borders, as politicians' rhetoric empowers and somehow justifies attacks against reporters. So journalists are now labeled enemies of the people, and that transforms them again into targets, person online. And that's what you were talking about as well, Consuela. And I think that again is something that is true everywhere. And part of the solution with that has got to be that journalists manage to have their own lines to the public and work on building their own relationship with the public, so it's not filtered through politicians, but it's much easier said than done. I know. I'm also very happy to answer questions. So do put questions in the chat, either to me or if you want one of the other speakers here to answer, please do. I'm just going to look through. Eduardo, is there anyone in particular you wanted me to jump out at?
I think there's a question by John Satter right now, actually about Brazil and Bolsonaro. He's saying, isn't this partly a problem of division of labor? How does everyone read about all the issues surrounding Bolsonaro and his family? I think he's making a point about what Consuelo just said. I mean, which kind of division of labor there is between the supporters and the leaders in terms of attacking the press, I guess.
Daniela, do you want to try having a go at that? Daniela?
Yeah, I think she's mute. She's on mute now, right?
Hi. There we go. I mean, I'm not sure I understand the question, John. How does everyone read about the issues? It's because everyone is reporting on them? I'm not sure. What the question is. I'm going to go to one, John, your other question, which I think is another kind of fundamentally interesting one, which is, can journalists support a leader like Bolsonaro and yet push the government to do the right thing? And I think that's something, just speaking from Britain, when I'm not saying for a minute that we're living under a Bolsonaro, but we're certainly living with a very charismatic leader who has a certain very loyal following amongst the media. So some of the media, have given him a massive platform and been very, very supportive of Boris Johnson, not least because he's a columnist for, he writes for them and, used to work for these media. And what's clear, I think, is that with this crisis, where there are serious questions about how Britain is handling the COVID-19 pandemic, even these media outlets have realized that to maintain any credibility or to keep their audiences and their readers, they also need to be critical. So without going into the heads of their editors, they might not want to be critical of Boris Johnson, but they are. So if you look at the Daily Telegraph and the Spectator, they've been largely in many ways supportive of the government, but they have also been very, very critical in two ways. Part of it has been a kind of anti-lockdown movement, which is, we can discuss that separately, but a part of it has been raising all the issues of care homes, about the elderly, about hospitals, because do remember that a lot of these readers are older. So when you have situations where it's the elderly who are being affected disproportionately by a disease and are not being given the care that they need, it's very hard for them to ignore the concerns of their reader, the demographic of their readership, in order to support a politician. So I think people do need to.
We have the million-dollar question from Darish David. How has social media and other tech platforms helped or made it difficult for journalists during these times? Do you think it was a good thing to have social media now, or is it a bad thing? Yeah.
That's a million-dollar question. I think Miriam touched on part of it, which is there is a lot of misinformation on social media, a lot of trolling, a lot of attacks on journalism. It's definitely been used to attack journalism, and legislation that is ostensibly meant to stop it actually stops journalism. So you can pass misinformation laws and it doesn't stop the people spreading misinformation, it stops journalists. And that's a very deliberate choice by journalists in what they do. And I think the next part of that is how social media and tech platforms made it difficult to see. You know, as always, the platforms are a distribution channel. So at a time when people can't go to get the newspapers delivered and when everybody is online, this is a platform that they can use. This is a way that the news can be delivered to their homes at a point that, you know, they might be able to go down to the shop. They might not be able to go to the shop or to the news agents or the kiosk, buy a newspaper. They can deliver it. So it's a two-way process, as always. But I think at the moment it's kind of intensified.
Meera, can I because I was frozen, sorry, but I would like to add something to the conversation about when you have a country polarized like Brazil, and I think media, it's also so polarized, the audience is so polarized, so we are not changing anybody's readership in the past, you know, like 3 years. People who read Piauí is the same people who was always reading Piauí. People who read Global is the same people who is reading Global for many times. So we're not getting new readership. This is the point. And I think when our friend asked about how people in general absorb this news about Bolsonaro's sons involved in this huge corruption scandals, everything. So the same people they discredit this kind of information, and the same people believe in this kind of information. So I think it's the main challenge for us, because we are preaching for the converts always. And I think it's with a self-censorship and all the problems we are discussing here, it's something. Because we are not getting new readers, we are not getting, we don't know how to talk to evangelical audience, which is the most powerful political force in Brazil right now. They only see and read things published by evangelical TV channels, evangelical newspapers and magazines. So we are not, moving forward in our audiences. This is the thing.
Thanks,
May
Daniela.
I add some important information. I think it's very important, and I'm very happy with this. The demand for information in traditional media in Brazil in this moment is increasing in 70%. The Association of the Newspaper release information that people are looking for information in not more in social media, but they are looking for information in traditional media. It's a good surprise in that moment, because we were being very attacked some months ago, and now this situation's changed here. I think because people, of course, is concerned about the COVID, the virus, but I think it's a good information. It's a good thing that's happened in Brazil in that moment. People looking for the traditional media again. We were very demoralized some months ago, and now things seems to change in Brazil. I think it's very interesting.
Thanks very much. I think you're absolutely right, Consuela. There is a lot of the research that we have done at the Reuters Institute, as well as other institutes, are showing that there is also a kind of desire for accurate information, for specialist information, for scientists, for experts, and also kind of a trust in the legacy media, the mainstream broadcasters, when they were already trusted. And that's the opportunity for journalism at this incredibly difficult time in other ways.
Yeah.
I think there's there's just one point I wanted to raise, which is really interesting, again, on the personal attacks issue, which Isabel Bannerman has raised this, and I didn't realize this, that in Germany, in Berlin, a reporter has been attacked and injured twice now, both from the German public. The anti-COVID-19 lockdown movement, which has kind of coalesced as this kind of slightly far-right, extremist, kooks, anti-establishment movement. And it's funny that it's funny and worrying that that's also now targeting journalists. Thank you. Eduardo, are there any other questions you'd like me to look at?
I think there's a couple of final questions. One is about ombudsmen, ombudsman persons and other bodies, and how, you know, can they help or hinder when media share fake or inaccurate news? I don't know if someone in the audience or you can, you know, have a go on this one.
The sharing of fake news has been criminalized. I think that we have to be very careful what we're talking about fake news here, because again, Reuters Institute research shows that when you ask people what they mean by fake news, sometimes it's misinformation, sometimes it's human error, sometimes it's bad journalism, and sometimes it's journalism they don't agree with. So if we are talking about human error, which I think is what most press ombudsmen would deal with, they would either deal with bad journalism, kind of, you know, being unfair to the people you interview, or making a genuine mistake in a story. I think in those cases, kind of, you can have an debate about what levels of regulation, and it's in everyone's interest that there is an effective, rapid way to correct these kind of mistakes, and that it's trusted by both the editors, the journalists, and the public. That's very important. I think when it comes to misinformation, it's slightly more difficult, because I would say that I don't think many journalists are knowingly spreading misinformation, unless you have this very specific example of misinformation coming from the top. So if you have a political leader, if you have President Trump in the US or Javier Bolsonaro saying something that's demonstrably false, journalists often fall over their feet in, you know, do you report what's said even if it's not true? But I don't think that's something that should be, that journalism should be attacked for quickly. I think it's a problem that everyone is trying to find a solution for.
Yeah, and finally, Meera, I think it's a question from me, but it's on the point that Consuelo just made. I mean, trust in news, at least some of our research says that it's going up during the pandemic in some countries. We've seen figures in Spain and the UK and others. So what do you think news organizations should do to make that kind of new trust stick and, you know, still be with us in the next couple of 3 years?
Well, I think we need to look at why trust is going up, and partly because people have very little other way of accessing news at the moment. So what they get from the media, you know, the coffee shop and the face-to-face interactions are gone, so everything is online. There is a crisis that is affecting everybody's lives, and the media have been very good at saying, this is how it's going to affect your life. This is what you can do, this is what you can't do. Here are some solutions. Here is somebody in your community that's delivering groceries to those who are vulnerable. Here is what's happening in the groups of people that you can't access yourself. Here's what's happening to the poor, to the vulnerable. And also, importantly, we will hold you up to account. You know, we will hold the politicians to account. We will ask the questions. We will tell you what we're trying to do. I think the journalists have been the best media organizations have been very transparent in saying, this is how we are trying to report. This is where we are doing our best work. This is how we're trying. We're using our internet sources. I think also journalists, the media houses have been, you know, the digital first debate is over. They've had to focus on the digital product. They've had to focus on their newsletters. They've had to really think about how they reach people online. And they've had to think very quickly about pricing. What do you put behind a paywall? What do you give for free? You know, so all these debates that have been happening in the media have suddenly intensified. And in some ways, that's a good thing, but I think there'll be a massive disruption and massive clean out. But if we can carry both this sense of transparency, making sure you stay relevant to communities, and also being very, very innovative, very fast, that should help.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think we're going to see a lot of distraction, but also a lot of innovation during this time, and hopefully that will be for the best. So, well, thank you everyone for coming. It's been a great webinar. Three quick things just to finish. First, as we always say, thank you for coming. We know how busy you are, how difficult this time is for journalists everywhere in the world. So we thank you for your service, for making the time to be with us today. Second, we will send Meera's slides and also the video of this webinar later today. So everyone who signed up has the chance to watch it or rewatch it. And finally, as I always say, please wash your hands and follow the advice of your government if that's sensible. That hopefully is. Thanks everyone for coming again, and we will see each other next week for our next online events. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Eduardo.
Thanks. Bye.